Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's start with headlines this Wednesday evening. First up, in a move signaling a balancing act between India and China after his trip to New Delhi, Sri Lankan President Anurakkumara Dissanayake will visit China next month, Sri Lankan Foreign Minister said, while adding that the newly elected government wants win-win ties with all countries. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang hold special representative talks. Border dispute, trade, visas are all on the agenda. US President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to impose a reciprocal tax on Indian goods, saying that if they tax us, we tax them. He has vowed to impose 100% tax and 200% tariffs on goods from India. How will this impact India-US business ties? Sunita Williams' return delayed till March 2025. She's stuck in space, says Williams on ISS. Sunita Williams says on ISS for over 6 months. Our first story on India Global today is what's happening in China and most importantly, the India-China relationship. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has met his Chinese counterpart. In fact, he's met the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang to address the India-China border issue as part of the Special Representative for Border Mechanism. Ajit Doval headed the India delegation and the 23rd round of talks, which are being held after a gap of 5 years. The last meeting was held in 2019 in New Delhi. Now, the two officials and the two sides are expected to discuss a range of issues and thrash out some very important and thorny issues, really, that India and China continue to have that plague the relationship. One is border dispute, then, of course, trade and visas, and connectivity is likely to be the other. In order to rebuild this bilateral ties, all these issues need to be sorted out. Remember, in the wake of recent disengagement efforts at Depsang and Demchok, signaling a potential breakthrough in the border resolution of the entire dispute. Now, while the talks began at 10 a.m. China time, details of the discussions are yet to emerge. There is expectations on both sides that this will pave the way for basically building up on trust that continues to be in major deficit on both sides. Let's get in Mohammad Ghazali for more on this to fill us in terms of what all can we expect. Ghazali, expectations are high that possibly this could pave the way for greater trust to be built on both sides.
Certainly, but if you see the statement coming out of the Chinese Foreign Ministry since this news came out that Mr. Doval will be arriving in Beijing yesterday and will be holding talks for today on 18th of December, there has been no word used like LSE or a standoff or Galvan in their statements for the last 2 days. What has come out from the Chinese side, which gives a lot of hope and positivity to this meeting, is that even Chinese Foreign Ministry says that it is trying to work with India for a long-term commitment on various issues, be it the border standoff, or the sources sort of confirm that there are talks, the talks which happened today must have included issues like connectivity. We have the issue of Mansarovar Yatra pilgrims, the pilgrims who want to go for Mansarovar Yatra, or the flight connectivity issue, as well as trade and investment perspective as well, which would have been discussed by Mr. Doval and his counterpart. India is also trying to see, or India and China both in some terms, Gaurie, that we have seen changes in the geopolitical scenario in and around the country, near our borders and also beyond our borders, not just in the Asian subcontinent, but also in Middle East and Europe, and how everybody is siding with one another. There has been complete, what you can say, a polarization. There have been multiple blocs at the global level which are working, and India and China on major of these issues concur. And that was the point when Chinese hinted that India and China can work on multiple such issues. And this, what I'm quoting right now, that India and China have concurred on multiple issues, was part of the Kazan statement when Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping met on the sidelines of the BRICS summit.
That may be correct in terms of the geopolitical realities that both India and China live in. But the fact is, Ghazali, that specific issues, the thorny issues, remain. The special representative meeting is very important. It's taking place after 5 years. But what realistically can we really hope to take back from this meeting, given that the thorny issues continue to plague the bilateral relationship?
Certainly, because many experts or analysts are also hinting that all these positive statements should not be taken or should be taken with a pinch of salt. Like Chinese may be showing all the intent of resolving the border crisis or resolving the dispute near the borders, but there are multiple reports also coming in that how near Bhutan border or near the other northeastern states of India, that how China has been seen building up infrastructure as well. So on one side, while they have been talking about resolving the border dispute, much needs to be seen in the action, and perhaps now after the meeting, Mr. Doval and his counterpart will issue a statement or will get more details about what was actually spoken about in the meeting or what further action has to be taken, because Prime Minister has met the Chinese President, Foreign Minister has met Mr. Wang, the Foreign Minister of China, and now he's also meeting the Special Representative for the Border Management, Mr. Ajit Doval. And now there will be many more meetings or delegation level talks are expected between India and China, and that will pave the way to see that how things at border or all these border disputes, which way it is going and how soon it is going to be resolved for good.
All right, Mohammad Ghazali, we leave it there. Appreciate you taking out the time on an important story. All right, shifting focus now to the other big story that we are tracking right now, which is the US has assured the safety of Ambassador Vinay Quatra after repeated threats have been put from Gurvat Pant Singh Pannu, a designated terrorist. Pannu, known for targeting Indian interests, has threatened the ambassador twice in the past 2 weeks, and which is why the US has come out strongly in support of our highest diplomat there. In fact, the banned group Sikhs for Justice has also accused ambassador of working with Russia against Khalistani extremists. Earlier today, the group announced a $25,000 reward for information on his whereabouts in the US. The US Embassy has told NDTV that they are firmly committed to the security and safety of all diplomatic consular personnel in the United States. All right, now turning our focus to the other big story that we are tracking coming in from Bangladesh. While ties between New Delhi and Dhaka remain on thin ice, Bangladesh's chief advisor Mohammad Yunus is all set to attend the 11th Developing 8 or the D8 summit in Cairo in Egypt, with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif also set to attend this summit. Now, this is an organization for development cooperation, that is the D8 for economic cooperation. It was founded in 1997 with the purpose of increasing economic trade cooperation and creating new opportunities, and includes Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan and Turkey. As per the Bangladeshi Foreign Ministry, Yunus is likely to hold a number of meetings on the sidelines. That includes the Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif. Look at the turn of events that have taken place in the last 5 months in Bangladesh. Since the 5th of August, what has happened? In fact, it's come a full circle from the time it underwent the student revolution to now, where you have Mohammad Yunus meeting the Pakistani Prime Minister in Egypt. Now, what does it mean in terms of Bangladesh-Pakistan ties going forward? What does it mean for the relationship and the subcontinent are larger issues that India Global will keep a very close watch on. Shifting focus and in fact talking more about Pakistan, it seems that Pakistan's poverty problem continues to compound after receiving a stark warning from Saudi Arabia urging Pakistan to prevent beggars from misusing Umrah and Hajj visas to travel to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina for begging. Islamabad has put roughly 4,300 beggars on the no-fly list in an attempt to stop them from traveling abroad. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Raza Naqvi has highlighted that his government will try and crack down on this. But the fact is that the Saudi Arabian government and administration has to call out Pakistan to say that don't send beggars in the name of using what is essentially a religious pilgrimage. That tells you A, the extent of poverty problem that Pakistan faces, and B, the propensity to misuse what is essentially a religious line that is opened. Well, thousands of poverty-stricken people are using this as under the pretext of religious pilgrimages and traveling to beg in Saudi Arabia. Many West Asian countries have warned Pakistan in the past as well. Stop exporting beggars. But it seems Pakistan needs more stern warnings before it acts on them. Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif is traveling to Cairo and to seek stronger economic ties with Turkey and Bangladesh. But his poverty problem back home is what he needs to focus more on. Turning our focus now to Russia, and the Russia-Ukraine war, where Russia has said that it has detained an Uzbek national who confessed to planting and detonating a bomb that killed its top general Igor, who was the head of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops. He was killed on Tuesday alongside his assistant when an explosive hidden in an electric scooter detonated outside his apartment building. This marks the highest profile assassination of a senior Russian military officer on Russian soil by the Ukrainian military intelligence services, claiming responsibility. Ukraine had accused Krylov of deploying chemical weapons against its forces, something that Russia has denied all along. But Russian authorities now allege the suspect admitted traveling to Moscow on orders from Ukraine's intelligence services. As per investigators, he confessed to planning and placing the explosive device on the scooter and setting up a surveillance camera in a rented car. The camera all allowed the operations organizers in Ukraine to watch this attack. And authorities also suspect that he was promised about $100,000 and a residency in a European country in exchange for carrying out this attack. Listen in to what the Russian Investigative Committee spokesperson had to say in what is sensational set of developments unfolding in the Russia-Ukraine war.
В ходе допроса он пояснил, что был завербован украинскими спецслужбами. По их заданию он прибыл в Москву и получил самодельное взрывное устройство. Он разместил его на электросамокате, который припарковал у подъезда жилого дома, где проживал Игорь Кириллов. Для наблюдения за местом проживания военнослужащего он арендовал автомобиль каршеринга, в котором установил видеокамеру. Съемка с нее транслировалась организатором теракта в онлайн-режиме в город Днепр. После того, как поступил видеосигнал о выходе военнослужащих из подъезда, взрывное устройство было дистанционно приведено им в действие.
Turning our focus now to the other war that continues to rage on, that is the one between Israel and Hamas, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has returned to court in his corruption trial, where he faces charges of fraud, breach in trust and accepting bribes in 3 separate cases. Remember, while on one end Israel is fighting the war, on the other end Israeli Prime Minister is fighting to prove his innocence. Accusations include receiving expensive gifts like cigars and champagne in exchange for favors, which Bibi has denied, calling the charges a political witch hunt. Last week, he became the first sitting Israeli leader to take the stand as a criminal defendant. Meanwhile, efforts to broker a ceasefire in the Gaza conflict continue, but there may be some fresh breakthrough, with the United States and Arab mediators working on a possible agreement between Israel and Hamas to end the 14th-long war and ensure that the hostages, those who are still alive, come back home. Mediators say progress has been made, but of course some disagreements continue, which is why a final deal hasn't been announced. But there is a potential that it may be so in the next coming days, and a ceasefire along with release of hostages may be on the cards. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with more news. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Global with me, Gaurie, Dwivedi. We now turn our attention to the latest coming in from the US, where there's some reason for cheer for hundreds of thousands of Indians. The Department of Homeland Security has now announced a final rule to modernize the H1B Visa program, enabling US companies to fill critical job vacancies more effectively. The updated rule will take place and will come into effect from 17th of January next year, and it will streamline the approval process. It will give employers more flexibility to retain top talent and strengthen the entire program. As per US authorities, these changes aim to address critical shortages that exist right now in the US labor market. This report tells you in greater detail the changes that have been made and why they mean so much to Indian talent. Take a look.
The Biden administration has announced that it's overhauling the high-skilled H1B visa program. The aim is to speed up applications and impose penalties on companies abusing the system. The H1B is one of the most highly competitive visas in the US immigration system's complex catalog, with big tech companies including Amazon, Google, and Tesla among the largest recipients. In 2024, over 85,000 were approved, but over 400,000 applications were received. The new H1B rule is attempting to modernize the program while bolstering enforcement. One of the key changes to the program is that employers must demonstrate the legitimacy of the specialty occupation role at the time of filing the application. On the other hand, non-profits and governmental research entities conducting research as a fundamental activity now qualify for H1B cap exemptions. Lastly, there's a big relief for students as there will be automatic extensions for F1 students transitioning to H1B. This is to prevent disruptions to the employment status until April 1st of the fiscal year. Though the changes seem to eliminate a lot of problems that spring up during and after H1B applications, there are some concerns as well. Trump had embraced the opposite approach during his first term, as he did not expand skill-based legal immigration. Instead, his officials curbed visa programs for educated workers by overseeing them more stringently. This time, however, the president-elect's remarks are giving signs that even if the rules remain restrictive, at least they won't tighten further. The new rules will come into effect on January 17, 2025, 3 days before Biden leaves office. In the meantime, employers are advising their international employees to be in the United States by January 20th, Trump's inauguration day. The big tech industry hopes that tech giants like Elon Musk, who has developed a strong bond with the president-elect, could convince Trump to offer more visas to highly skilled foreign workers. All eyes are now on Trump and what his next move pertaining to high-skilled international workers would be. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, in yet another delay, Indian origin astronaut Sunita Williams will now return from the ISS, or the International Space Station, in March next year. NASA insists that the crew is healthy and safe aboard the ISS. US Space Agency announced that the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft tasked with bringing her back will launch no earlier than late March. Sunita Williams reached the ISS in June this year, but her return has been delayed to early next year. With the Boeing Starliner spacecraft she piloted to space, she has been stuck in space for now almost 9 months with fellow 6 months, I beg your pardon, with fellow astronaut Butch Williams as well. Pallava Bagla, our science editor, explains the reasons for this delay.
Indian origin NASA astronaut Sunita Williams will stay longer in space. NASA has announced that the mission which will go and bring her back from the International Space Station will now launch only in late March 2025. Astronaut Sunita Williams flew to the International Space Station in June 2024 on a 7 to 10 day mission on the Boeing Starliner. The Boeing Starliner had some issues and she was asked to stay back at the International Space Station, and she is now the commander of the International Space Station. Now, initially, the plan was that astronaut Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, who flew together on Boeing Starliner, would return in February 2025. Now, the Crew Dragon is going some tests, and now it will fly only in late March 2025 to the International Space Station. Once it goes there, rendezvous with the International Space Station and returns, only then astronaut Sunita Williams will come back to Earth. She is a veteran of space flights. She has already spent over 500 days in space, and by the time she comes back, it could well be 9 months in space. There are other astronauts on the International Space Station, along with astronaut Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, and NASA says all of them are safe and will return to Earth at their designated times. Long stays at the International Space Station has become a common thing. Yes, human body does undergo changes when when humans are flying in near zero gravity. So obviously, there would be changes in the body of astronaut Sunita Williams, but most astronauts recover when they return back to Earth. But now, the commander of the International Space Station, astronaut Sunita Williams, will return to Earth no earlier than late March or early April 2025. Repeatedly, her stay at the International Space Station is being extended by NASA, all part of abundant caution.
All right, turning our attention now to sports news, where our Ashwin has retired from international cricket with immediate effect, announcing his resignation and decision at the end of the third test of the Border Gavaskar Trophy Series in Brisbane. Ashwin ends his test career as India's second highest wicket taker in the format with 537 wickets at an average of 24, next only to Anil Kumble, who had 619 wickets to his credit. My colleague Osama Sharp, who's been tracking sports very closely, joins us for more details. Osama, it's been a very stellar record for our Ashwin. Talk to us about some of his most memorable matches and some of his most memorable bowling spells.
You know, one of the most memorable decisions that Ravichandran Ashwin has taken is is on the same line as his mentor and his former captain, MS Dhoni. Remember, it was 2014 and it was the Australia series that MS Dhoni, right in the middle of that series, decided to hang up his boots. And this is exactly what Ravichandran Ashwin has also done. Followed in the same footstep, decided to quit playing international cricket. Right in the middle of the series, there have been a lot of conversation around the timing of Ravichandran Ashwin deciding on finishing his career as an international cricket. But you know, when you talk about his records, when you talk about what he has given to cricket, and especially Indian cricket, it is only second to Anil Kumble. He is the second highest wicket taker. He is, in fact, the second fastest to reach that 500 wicket mark. But when you also think of it in the sense that he's the fastest to reach 50 wickets, and then 100 wickets, and 150, 200, 250 till 450, that in itself is something that not a lot of people would imagine in their career. And this is something that Ravichandran Ashwin has achieved. He is second only to the great Muthaiya Muralidharan to capture most 5-wicket hauls in Test cricket, the most player of the series in Test cricket. But this is only Test cricket that we are talking about. When you look at his journey as an international cricket in ODIs or T20, he has left his mark in every single format, and that is the beauty of this cricketer. And like he said right in that press conference while he was announcing his retirement, that he is probably one of the last OGs of Indian cricket, the old generation of Indian cricket. It actually sits right, because apart from Ashwin, you don't really have somebody who can fill in those shoes at the moment.
Indeed.
We'll have to wait and watch what happens in the future. But for now, it's goodbye to Ashwin.
Absolutely. Thanks much, Osama, for telling us all those details. And on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side of India Global with the latest in terms of the India-China relationship and their road to finding trust with each other. Stay with us. welcome back. You're watching India Global. We now turn our attention to the latest in the India-China relationship, especially as the special representative meeting is taking place after 5 years. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang to discuss the India-China border issue as part of the special representatives for the border mechanism. Doval headed the Indian delegation in the 23rd round of talks, which are being held after a gap of 5 long years. The last meeting was held in 2019 prior to the Galwan conflict in 2020. The two officials are expected to discuss a range of issues, most importantly the border dispute. Then there are trade and connectivity issues, visa issues. In order to rebuild the bilateral ties in the wake of recent disengagement efforts that have taken place at Depsang and Depchok, signaling a potential breakthrough in the broader resolution of the border dispute. While the talks began at 10 a.m., there is expectation on both sides even as details are yet to emerge. Ahead of the meeting, when asked about rebuilding trust, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said Beijing is ready to work with New Delhi to implement the important common understandings between the leaders of the two countries and work to bring bilateral relations back on track as soon as possible. Beijing also emphasized the need to respect each other's core interests and major concerns, strengthen mutual trust through dialogue and communication, and properly settle differences with sincerity and good faith. This is all that the Chinese readout has been ahead of the meeting. But most importantly, we put out the key questions that we discuss today. As we say that also on the show, is this the road to trust? Remember, trust deficit is the biggest thing, and that's the question we are asking also. Will there be now more trust and less suspicion on both sides? The other key question we ask, will talks lead to further de-escalation on the border in terms of, remember, there is still build-up on both sides. How will that go down, the build-up or truth build-up on both sides? The next thing we ask is, what's really pushing Xi Jinping towards this road to trust? Remember, Donald Trump, President-elect, comes to power in just about a month from now. He's already set his task against China very clearly. Is that the reason why Xi Jinping wants to ensure that at least one major issue gets sorted out from a geopolitical point of view, from a trade point of view, given the fact that his economy is also teetering right now? Answering and getting an answer to all those questions is what I hope. I have Ambassador Meera Shankar, who's a former diplomat, joining me on the broadcast, and we also have General Sanjay Soy as well to talk more about. General Sanjay, let me start with you, sir. As things stand right now, there's an expectation and there's a hope that some of this may translate into better trust building on both sides. But how do you go about addressing the core issue, the fundamental issue, which remains the border dispute?
Gaurie, in fact, I would say I would give it a thumbs up in terms of maintaining a communication. Yes, after years of distrust, years of suspicion, at least we are talking, and this is the meeting after 2019, as you have rightly brought out, which makes it very, very important, and also makes it important since for our side, NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval is there, from their side, Wang is there. Though these are the people who can take a call, who can take a decision, and who have gone, both sides have come very well prepared, and they are ready for discussion on the positive side. Probably both sides are looking at the positive side of the discussion. As far as the LAC is concerned, from the army point of view, I would say that since it is a notional line, it is a demarcated line, which was earlier a McMahon line, and it is drawn with a thick pen, and we have, both sides have our own understanding of the line, because when we talk on the border side, the soldier who is deployed on the border, from his point of view, it is 1 kilometer this side, and from China point of view, it is 1 kilometer on the other side. That is one part, very small thing. Besides that, so they need to be told, okay, this is the no man land, this is the understanding, we got to gradually build a trust, gradually demilitarize the area. Both sides have been, mirror deployment has been there, the infrastructure has come up, the camps have come up, those things have started dismantling. So that kind of trust has to be built up, because in the past what we have seen, not once but many times, China, we have been betrayed by China.
Exactly. One step forward, 3 steps backward. That has been the story every time there is an effort to try and bridge that trust deficit. Point taken. Let me get in Meera Shankar on this as well. The fact is, ma'am, that when you talk about diplomatic goodwill, you talk about building diplomatic forward steps. This is essentially it. This is probably the biggest step the two sides are taking after 5 long years, in the hope that they will be able to at least address some of the other issues, whether it's connectivity, trade, visas. Those are important issues as well that right now are being completely sidetracked because of the border issue. Are you hopeful that those issues will be addressed?
Well, I think India has to take it a step at a time. I think our position has to be trust but verify. You cannot take things on pure trust alone with China, and much is going to depend on what Chinese actions are and how their behavior unfolds. Because if at the same time that we are de-escalating in the in the Western sector, we find that steps are being taken to ramp up infrastructure near Doklam or along the Arunachal border, well, that is not going to lead to trust. And right now, what has happened is the first step. You have reached agreements on patrolling and on disengagement, that is, pulling back your forces in the areas of direct confrontation. There are larger issues now, the removal of infrastructure which has been built, and finally, demilitarization, at least in a certain band near the border. This, despite the fact that China has the infrastructure advantage because Tibet is a plateau and they can virtually drive right up to the border. India has to climb up and down many valleys and peaks before reaching the border. So there is a disadvantage which we have in terms of logistics in border management. China has been building up military infrastructure in Tibet for years now, for decades now. The supply lines from the mainland to Tibet have shortened dramatically. There are bases for missile deployment in Tibet and military infrastructure, other villages, civilian villages are coming up all along the disputed border area. So I think this is the first step. It's a positive step.
I was coming to just
but
that,
we have to wait and see that this process is completed and taken
absolutely.
to
Listen to my question,
logical
ma'am. I understand.
conclusion.
I'm asking you a question, which is that this is an important first step, but the fact that this has happened after 5 years is a positive development. But what would be your expectations in terms of deliverables from here on? Are we expecting too much out of a meeting, given that there are so many thorny issues?
Look, I think that India has to take it a step at a time. After all, it was our position that relations could not proceed in a business as usual way till these transgressions by China on the border were resolved. And that process has now started. So I don't think that we should leap forward in terms of the relationship. We have to move cautiously, step by step. Yes, this is positive, but at the same time, there's a lot more ground to cover, and the larger question looms because the border is not resolved, because even the line of actual control has not been jointly defined by the two sides, the chances of recurrence of border friction is very strong.
Indeed.
You know, after all, we had these agreements on maintaining peace and tranquility in the border areas since 1992.
Hold your thought there, ma'am. Hold your thought there.
They were broken.
Hold your thought there, ma'am. I want to ask that question to General Soy as well. Your thoughts on expectation are high, but in terms of actual deliverables, beyond the good optics, very good and very important optics, what would be your deliverables that you would expect from this in terms of a best case scenario?
Yeah, I think I will agree with Ambassador Meera that we got to go a step at a time, and there are many issues, not one issue, because on the one side there's a passport stapling of the passport in the people from Arunachal Pradesh, or otherwise there are border issues on the northeast side, development of infrastructure, the dismantling of defenses. So while I would appreciate, yes, communication is very, very important. We are two very emerging economies, and our business with China is almost touching $118 billion, and we are becoming the more bigger trade partner with China than the America. So China is also looking forward for developing the better relations with India, maintaining the better relations with India. So there would be many positives and deliverables, maybe in terms of LAC, in terms of economy, in terms of the better communication and better diplomatic relations. But will China stop their string of pearl strategy of Maldives, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, trying to strangle India from all sides? Will they stop support to the militants indirectly when we go to the UN and they give them shelter and use the veto power? Or will they again continue with the expansionist policy? That is there are many things. So, as a military mind, I would say that yes, communication is very important. We need, if we could be friendly, it is good for both of us. But we need to be cautious, and we cannot let our guards down. As you, Gaurie, you have rightly brought out, one step forward, three steps backward. But suppose if it is only one step forward and we don't go back, three steps backward, it will be a good development for both the countries. And
Indeed.
I think China, because of the Trump coming in, is also looking forward to probably securing one side of their front with the friendly
Exactly.
relations with India.
Exactly, exactly. And a story that we are going to keep a very close watch on, given that India-China relationship will continue to be an area of focus for India Global. I'm slipping into a very short break. I come back on the other side and talk more about the other very important story, which is the India-US relationship as US President-elect threatens more tariffs, more taxes. Where does the India-US bilateral relationship from a business perspective go? We come back and talk more on that. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. We turn our attention now to the other very important bilateral relationship, the US-India relationship. How will it get impacted as US President-elect Donald Trump comes good on some of his comments and promises he's been making the last couple of months? And in fact, the latest commentary that's come in from the President-elect is also that if they tax us, we tax them as well. Speaking along with his Treasury Secretary, Donald Trump made it absolutely clear and pointed out that India, in fact, puts out some taxes that are as much as 100%, and then asked that should America also not be taxing you Indian goods. Now, what does this mean? Remember, in his first term also, he called India tariff king. He also removed the GSP, which ensured that over $5 billion worth of goods which were under the tax-free domain that shelter was taken away from Indian goods. Now, what does that mean in his second term? Will he come good on some of these promises, or is this election rhetoric which may not translate into actual policy when he comes into Oval Office? Remains to be seen, but one thing is certain, that how will India move ahead in terms of its trade relationship and its strategic relationship could really be the cornerstone of its policy with America. To talk more on this, let's get in Jayant Krishna, who's a senior fellow at CSIS, and Ambassador Meera Shankar continues to be with us as well. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking out the time. And Ambassador Meera, let me start with you, ma'am. Some of these comments that the President-elect had made, it is a carryover from what he did in his previous term as well. But the commentary is not just more regular, more consistent, but even sharper, as some would say, that, he's actually said 100%. He also pointed out BRICS. In your assessment, how do you see this in terms of after he takes over office come 20th January?
Look, let's wait and see what he actually does. We've seen the rhetoric on China during the campaign, where Trump said he's going to put 50 to 60% tariffs across the board on all Chinese imports into the US. And now he has said he will put 10% additional tariffs on Chinese imports. We don't know additional tariffs if it will apply across the board or it will apply only to the goods which had punitive tariffs imposed earlier, but it's a far cry from the rhetoric during the campaign. So let's wait and see what actually happens. Yes, there is certainly ground to believe that there could be increased trade friction, as there was during Trump's first term. But
Indeed.
I'm sure that India will negotiate with the US administration, and that there are factors which also bring the two countries together, which will continue to drive the broader relationship. So it's
Indeed.
going to be, I would say, a mixed bag as far as the relationship is concerned. But I wouldn't prejudge what Trump is actually going to do. Yes, sometimes there is a danger that when it is too tough to take action against China and rhetoric has been raised to a very high level, the easy fallback option is to actually act against countries like India and Brazil, who don't really account for such a
Indeed.
large portion of the US deficit. You know, our trade surplus with the US is somewhere like 20, 25, $28 billion, far cry from China's, which is several $100 billion.
Indeed.
And so actually, India does not, in a sense, represent a major problem for the United States.
Absolutely.
Even in the services sector, the trade surplus we have is just $7 billion, and US trade in services with India has been growing as fast as, if not faster, than Indian services exports to the
Indeed.
US. So broadly balanced trade, not a threat to the US, and our service exports actually help the competitiveness of US companies.
That's an important point you've made, ma'am. And let me get in, Jayant Krishna, on just that. Two aspects. One is how much of this would actually translate into policy action. And if Mr. Trump does find himself into a corner in not being able to fulfill some of his China-centric promises, will he probably double down on countries like India or the BRICS back totally, excluding China? And how much of the Trump-Modi bonhomie could actually insulate this trade relationship? Let's take them one by one. First, how much of this do you see that translating into policy action?
So, Gaurie, if President Trump's last presidency is any indication, he did increase the tariff on certain category of steel exports from India to the US. So he's capable of doing that. But fundamentally, I believe, I think during elections, the kind of promises he made, or even post-election results, what he has been saying, I think it's more for posturing. I don't know much of it. How will it see the light of the day? Because at the end of the day, retaliation of, if India has a higher import duty on some of the US, of the stuff we import from the US, and if he wants to retaliate, it doesn't work in the global scheme of things. See, everything is up for negotiations, and other is, see, different countries have the competitive advantage in different product categories and different service categories, right? So this kind of a retaliation doesn't work. See, what intrigues me is, in a world today, in a global order where multilateralism is the requirement. Trump always puts this America first and to hell with the rest of the world. So I think that is something, that approach, I hope it changes, and he has good counselors and advisors around him who say that, in international affairs, that's not the way things work today, right? And I mean, look at any product. For example, let's look at iPhone, which is an American company. China manufactures a very, very large component of the global iPhone manufacture of global iPhones globally.
Mr. Krishna.
India is also emerging as a major this thing, but they do it in China and India not because they want to oblige us. They do it because it makes business sense for US.
I understand that, sir. I understand that there is good business. But good business, if it doesn't translate into good politics, then that's pretty much what politicians need to see through that lens, right? But let me then ask you the other question I asked, and then I will get in Ambassador Meera as well after you, which is how much of the bonhomie between the leaders do you see helping India insulate its trade relationship, or at least its strategic goals?
So they are Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. They are known to be good friends, and they have a reasonable degree of bonding. Although he did not, Prime Minister Modi did not leverage that bonding during the U.S. election this time. Wisely so, he maintained an arm's distance. Unlike the last elections, where he actively sort of campaigned for Trump. So so I think I have a feeling the bond that they have. Would come to India's advantage when Prime Minister Modi negotiates that with the US. And much of these things I think are mere apprehensions. It will not happen because even American industry would not accept, right? So tariff is one thing. The visa regulations. These kind of things. It's okay for electoral posturing, but I don't see much of it happening, and much of the damage, which, if at all such a thing happens, can cause to India. I think much of it could be prevented by very, very smart business negotiations over tariff, over import duties, and these kind of trade issues.
Let's get in a quick view from Ambassador Meera on that how much of it can be insulated due to the bonhomie between the two leaders.
Look, it helps to overcome hurdles in the relationship when things get stuck. If you remember last time, the action that Trump had taken was tariffs on steel and aluminium imports from India and a whole host of other countries around the world. We were part of that package. He had withdrawn GST for certain categories of exports to the US, and also tightened the H1B visa process. But it is US companies like Microsoft, like Facebook, like IBM, who are the biggest users of H1B visas. And actually, if you look at the Indian employees on H1B visas, they are really at the much upper end of the salary scale in the US, filling technical gaps which the US finds difficult to fill at this juncture. So it really helps the competitiveness of US companies. Then we had negotiated, we had bought oil and gas and planes from the US, and, to some extent that had ameliorated some of the trade friction. So I'm sure that now too we will discuss these issues pragmatically in the hope that we can arrive at some bargains which are mutually acceptable to the two sides. In the broader framework of things, I think there is the China threat, which Trump focuses on, which brings India in as an important balancer along with the US in the Indo-Pacific. And of course, there is the growing defense and security relationship.
Indeed.
So there are factors, as I said, which also help to bring a broader context to the relationship, though Mr. Trump has in the past not allowed alliances to come in the way of
Ambassador Meera, I couldn't agree more with you, ma'am, but there is a time limitation, and I'm sure that we will continue this conversation again, given that tariff is almost the second word that President-elect is now saying and these days. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking out the time, speaking to me on India Global. With that, we're completely out of time on this edition. Thanks so much for watching.